Mama, I got bad news, bad news. I've been rolling with some bad dudes, bad dudes. I've been trying to get a bag too.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Ashes to Awesome podcast, Rising in Recovery. Our podcast provides light, hope, and understanding about addiction and mental health to those living within that life and the people who love them. This episode is brought to you by Together We Can, where Canada recovers from addiction. That's twcrecoverylife.org. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Ramble on the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, and joining me in virtual studio today is, of course, my co-host, Carl the Atheist. How you doing today, Carl?
Doing great, Chuck.
And Dr. Lisa, it's good to have you back after not having you. Well, I guess I never had either one of you last week, did I? I did a solo Weekend Ramble. So welcome back, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm great. And our honored guest today, Erin Johnston from somewhere in Louisiana. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the town.
Shreveport, top of the boot.
All right. And I didn't write it down, so you're going to have to hope I remembered this properly. You are an addictions counselor and a bunch of other stuff. So what else you got going on there?
So I'm in Louisiana, and I am an LPC, which stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. So that's basically all your mental health things. And then LAC is what I specialize in, which is Licensed Addiction Counselor. And I've been working with addictions for about 13 years.
Okay, great. Right off the bat, I got to ask: does that stem from a history of addictions in yourself, with yourself, or is some other driver that got you into the field?
It's a real funny story. So no, I'm actually not in recovery. Which I have a lot of clients that are like, "Why am I going to listen to you if you haven't done it?" I'm like, "Well, don't you want to be like me?" And they're like, "Actually, you got me." And I'm like, "Okay, good." And so a lot of my clients are like, "You know what? I want to learn how to do life without drugs and alcohol like you have. So I'm going to listen to you." And I was like, hallelujah. Yeah. Because I was always afraid of that question. Like, you don't know anything about this. And so, no, I'm not in recovery, but I've been studying it a long time. I started in 2007 when I went to college, and our college was offering an entire separate bachelor's degree for addiction studies because it was becoming such a deal. Like, in 2008 is when they started really, really recognizing that substance use treatment needs to be, offered a lot more than it is because it was really on the rise, and it's unfortunately still on the rise. So we have a lot more.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, right? It just keeps. I think the numbers are going up faster now than they ever were, right? So yeah. Okay.
Can I interject one thing, Erin? So I get that obviously as well, right? Like, I'm also not in recovery, and so I've also been given that question or heard that. And one of the things I'll often say to patients as well is, if you have cancer and you go see your oncologist, if your oncologist has not themselves had cancer, do you think that they can't help you with your cancer?
Right.
Do you know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Just another angle, right?
I think everything comes back to cancer, does it? Dr. Lisa?
Yeah, I often, cancer and diabetes are two I tend to use. I just kind of pick on those for whatever reason, but I'll often, look at some other medical illness and frame questions that way, and it often changes people's perspectives.
Well, you still got me on the coerced treatment or mandated treatment. You totally got me with that one, right? So, definitely. So, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a quick minute to talk really fast about that. Daniel Unmanageable over at Hard Knocks Talks had a police chief on this past Sunday, so a week ago now, I guess, talking about coerced treatment in Alberta and what they're doing here and whether or not they should continue to, or if they should move on with similar policies in Saskatchewan. So I don't know how much you know about Canada, but that's the next province over, the next equivalent to a state over from us, right? So, yeah, you don't know, right? So,
Texas is Alberta, Louisiana is Saskatchewan.
Yeah, without the guns and the racism, right?
Thank you, Carl.
Without the guns.
Oh. Anyway. Fuck's sakes, Carl. And I just wanted to say that real quick because it is an incredible episode. I listened to it finally yesterday morning, I think it was, and I was just blown away by some of the coming out of the cop's mouth. And you've lived the last 30 years the way I have, it's it's hard to look at police sometimes that way. And he was speaking some really great things were coming out of it. This policing's come a long way. So I know, Carl, you're just dying to chomp me for saying that, but
I'll definitely go listen. So was that a police officer from Calgary?
No, it was the Saskatoon Chief of Police. Yeah, so
Okay.
they're talking about doing it in Saskatchewan as well.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So, right, and of course, politics being what they are between the two provinces, were pretty aligned, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up a very similar model to ours in the very near future. So yeah. So what I really wanted you on here for, Erin, in the first place, I guess the first reason I wanted you on, I should reframe that, was to talk about smart recovery. So it's, for me personally, it's come up quite a bit lately. Before 2 months ago, I'd never even heard of it. I honestly don't know that I'd ever heard of it. 3 months ago, I guarantee I hadn't heard of it before 3 months ago, which is crazy. My whole life is recovery for the last 7-8 months that we've been doing this show. This is 14 hours a day I do recovery, and I'd never heard about this before. So got some questions going. We talked about some of the challenges, and I think I'm going to leave that whole part alone for now, because it seems very limited experience. Yeah. If you're going to talk about smart recovery to somebody that's never heard of it, what's your spiel? Because I know you got one, right?
Oh, I do. So, a lot of times in recovery, we hear about 12-step model or abstinence-based, which is great, okay? I want everybody to know that, as a licensed addiction therapist, I don't really sway one way or the other, because there's so many different variables and there's different people that I come across that need different things. So there really isn't a cookie-cutter plan for anybody, really. And so, although I am going to talk about smart recovery, I am a huge fan of smart recovery. I want that to go alongside that I do not discriminate against any other intervention that you do choose to use. Okay. But I am going to talk about the differences, because the one self-help group that we all probably know about is AA. We have AA, NA, and many other forms. And typically they use an abstinence-based approach, which is great and needed for some people. But for some people, they aren't spiritual, or they don't want to be spiritual or religious or use a higher power. So smart recovery came to be around in the 90s, and they said, well, give me the stats on AA. And they said, oh, well, we would, but it's anonymous, so we kind of can't. Now, you can ask a lot of people if it worked for them, and they'll say yay or nay. But there's
Can I say something to
hard
ask?
evidence.
Can I interrupt? Because they can't, or because they don't know? They don't have the stats? Because it is anonymous. Thinking myself, nobody ever questioned me about my journey as an individual there, so they just don't know? Is that accurate? About a 12-step?
So close. So it's kind of like, how we all think that cigarettes cause cancer, right? We all think that. We've all been told that, as we all smoke on the show. But technically, there's not a lot of evidence behind that. So there's a difference between correlation and causation. Thank you, Carl.
That's vaping. That's not smoking, right?
Whatever.
It's still nicotine.
It's still nicotine, yeah. So, for instance, in the South, or probably anywhere, swimming deaths and drowning deaths go up in the summer. Why? Because more people are swimming, right? And so I don't think we can really do a lot of correct evidence research on AA because of the anonymity and the people that want to be anonymous, and also the definition of success and recovery, right? So someone might say, oh, I'm in recovery. I also take Suboxone. Well, somebody might go, you can't be in the study. And then somebody else might say, well, I'm in recovery. I'm on nothing. Okay, great. You can be in it. And so, what really is the proper definition of success and recovery? It's different. So there's not going to be some 2 + 2 = 4 evidence out there for AA.
I feel like it does. It does make sense. I feel like that's overcomplicating the issue. I can see why it is what it is. I'm not disagreeing with you in any way. I'm just thinking.
Definitely.
I mean, a pretty easy definition of recovery would be: am I happy compared to where I was? Yes. Right. So to me, that's enough. Right. Am I a productive member of society? Am I contributing to my family? Am I not, ostracized by everybody I love? yeah, okay, I'm doing okay. To me, that's a pretty good measure of success when you're going to speak about recovery. But you're right about some of the biases that come out of a 12-step. And I'm sorry, I've got to be really careful not to bash 12-step. For me, my first month...
That's why I said that at the beginning.
My first month was I couldn't have done it without the rooms, right? And for my own reasons, I came out of it. But go ahead, Lisa, of course. Yeah.
I think it's also the nature of doing scientific studies, right? Like when you're doing scientific studies, in order to be able to do the analysis, you need to have these very clearly defined criteria to be within the study. And so I think what you're talking about, Chuck, is common sense, right? Like success in recovery is that you're functioning and you're happy, you're not hurting yourself and everybody around you. But in order to do a study and to be able to analyze it and run statistics and all of that, you need to have these really clearly defined things, which is why sometimes it's hard to transmit the results of a study into real life.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Fair enough. It never occurred to me before, but how do you not know what the numbers are? But I guess you don't, right? You just don't. That's crazy. Right. That's crazy. So it's the same thing except for Smart Recovery then. Do you know what the numbers are? Hey guys, I'm not sure if everybody knows about our new show, Morning Cup of Kindness. It's a show that I host, and it's just a 5-minute thing every day, Monday to Friday. Start your day off with a smile, a story about some random kindness, maybe a couple stories if they're really short, right? But today I decided that if you have a nonprofit, if you have any kind of organization, a company that's got a fundraiser, anything to do with kindness in the world that you need the message to get out about, you can record a 5-minute episode with a story about random kindness, and at the end, do a 30 to 60 either pre-made commercial or verbal mention of whatever it is that you're trying to promote. The caveat is it has to be for a good cause, right? So I don't want you to come on and promote your clothing business or your pizza restaurant. I want you to come on and talk about something that's bringing kindness to the world in some sort of, be it a fundraiser, be it a nonprofit that needs a mention, whatever. It's a pretty easy threshold to make, I think. I don't think I'm making this too difficult. So get in touch with us, ashesdawsonpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll make sure that we get that set up for you. So thanks for listening, guys. Do you know what the numbers are? You do.
Good question. Okay, so the reason why Smart Recovery can be studied, and I'd have to pull up some numbers if you really wanted them, but it's because of exactly what you just said. So there is no, like, in a Smart Recovery room, you might have somebody that's sober. You might have somebody that's on medication-assisted treatment. You might have somebody that's still using. And so they're all not in the room with the same goals exactly, but they're going to learn some tools to get wherever their success is. So someone might say, well, my success is getting my kids back, being a good member of society, having a job, getting back in a relationship with my friends and family, okay?
Yeah.
And then someone might say, my definition of success is getting off all my medications, being completely abstinent from everything, including my antidepressants, okay? There might be that person. And then there might be somebody that says, well, I'm just here to learn about how to help my son. So, like Lisa was saying, the parameters are kind of very different. And so SMART also talks about, like, the power of choice. And so they kind of say, like, hey, whatever you want to do, you can do it. If you want to do a harm reduction model, which might be, I'm not using meth, but I'm able to drink alcohol for the football games and put it down, great.
Whatever.
If you over here want to be completely abstinent from everything, and that's what you want, great. You have the power of choice. And there is no, those two people in the same room are going to give each other flack for their route of recovery.
Erin, does that make studying Smart Recovery even more complicated, though?
I would think.
Because I think to me, the fact that, what's deemed success, and I think, I agree with that approach, but I feel like that would make Smart Recovery even harder to study and to quote stats. Because
at least abstinence is a clear line, right? Right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Lisa.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what they do, I think how they word it, if I'm not mistaken, is blah % of people that attend Smart Recovery have resulted being happier. Like, it's very vague.
So basically what I said.
They are sober.
Right? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
that's why you would be a great smart recovery person. Like you would fit right in. You would love it.
SMRT. Right?
So it might say like are successful, and then it'll say like they define success as
right.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right.
Well,
It
I
might
think
not be they were clean for 80 days or whatever.
I think one of the major differences I found just in reading about smart recovery compared to AA is AA sets a goal for you. This is your goal. This is what we're here to achieve. We're going to get there. Smart recovery allows you to set a realistic goal that you can achieve, that's not set by somebody else. So like you said, right? Like I want to be off my medications, or I want to quit math, but I still want to have a beer at the football game. I think like when you set a realistic goal, it's going to be more achievable.
Absolutely.
And instead of somebody telling you, well, you know what, this is your goal and you're not achieving it. You can set yourself a little goal like, you know what, I'm not going to do meth this week. Maybe that's your goal for your first, right? And if you make it the whole week, well, that's a success. And then when you see that success, it might drive you to be like, you know what, I did it for a week, I can do it for another week. And whereas, in AA, I've never been to AA or 12-step or anything like that, just because of the religious whole thing about religion in that. It's honestly like when I read it, I was actually mentioning to Dr. Lisa before Chuck and Erin joined in, was this sounds a lot like what I did for myself when I quit drugs. My goal was to not be doing meth, to not be doing crack, to not be doing coke, because I have a family and I need to be there for my family. I need to be a parent. I need to be an employee. I need to, right? And I achieved those small goals. Now I didn't drink for a couple years and I didn't smoke any pot for a couple years, but that wasn't my issue. And then when I decided that, you know what, I'm through this stuff, I can get through it, then I'd have a beer. But, I would be smart about it, right? Like I would set a goal, a realistic goal. I'm only going to have 2 beer with dinner. And I would have 2 beer, and then that was that. And I think that's kind of what smart recovery is.
Absolutely.
Is trying to push. And even like, I didn't even realize it was an acronym, self-management recovery training. I mean, it's training you. It's giving you these tools.
It actually is SMRT, not SMART. Did I get that right?
Well, the
A. And.
Oh, and. Oh, nobody uses the... Okay, whatever. Right?
Probably because they didn't want SMRT. But yeah, I just wanted to say...
I've been spelling it wrong this whole damn time, so okay.
I really like the fact that you're setting a realistic goal. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Setting realistic goals. Go ahead.
I said you were
Erin,
probably writing SMRT.
Can I ask you a question, Erin? When you were first talking about it, one of the things as you were starting out to describe SMART was you were, and in comparing it to AA, is you were saying, that at SMART, there can be people there who are on Suboxone. There can be people there who are abstinent. There can be people there who are still actively using. But I mean, that's also true of AA. Now, I get that there are times people go into an AA meeting, and if they're on something like a prescription opiate agonist, that people will have an issue with that or call them out on that. But I still think it's important to point out that fundamentally,
the only rule is the desire to stop using, right?
Exactly.
To
and so,
walk into a 12-step, right? So, yeah.
Because I also don't want, and I'm not for one or the other, obviously, but I think it's just important to point out that for anyone listening, if there's a desire to stop, you can go to AA. You don't have to have stopped, and you don't have to not be on methadone, and you don't, Yeah.
It's a different in culture and acceptance for sure. And I was thinking, Lisa, I'm glad that you said that exactly when you said it, because I was just sitting here thinking, this can't turn into one of those "this is better than this" episodes, right? So, but
and you can go
that
to
said,
both.
To the listener, it's going to sound like that because we have a guest who is with Smart Recovery today. So it's not about bashing 12-step. We're pointing out some of the differences, but it is going to sound, because you got somebody here who's That's your method of choice anyway, right? So, really good point, Lisa. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Yeah.
And I will say, I can't speak for every single SMART meeting, and I can't speak for every single AA meeting, but I have physically been in many meetings over the years. And one thing I can say just about the meetings that I've been to, okay, so there's going to be somebody out there that's like, well, I've been to a meeting and they didn't do that, of course. It's like anything else in the world, right? But, a lot of times when I've been in a 12-step meeting and someone does share something that might not be completely accepted in AA, they don't feel completely accepted in AA when they want to share what's really going on. Like, hey...
Yeah, in my experience as well, you are definitely going to curb your sharing, I guess, in a way that
absolutely,
you're not going to be totally open about it in the culture that I've seen anyway, right? So, and again, for most of us in recovery, 12 steps was absolutely integral to the early days of that. Some people evolve into something else or grow into something else, and I think it's always so important. Our own Ryan Bathgate, for instance, not a big fan of 12 steps. But, hey, if it wasn't for the 12 steps, he wouldn't be sitting here complaining about the 12 steps, right? So, we always have to we have to remember that, right? It's just the reality of it, that is so important for so many people. My first month wouldn't have happened without the rooms. There's no way. So I just want to take a quick minute and let you know about a new sponsor of ours, Rosecrest Recovery Services. You might remember Rich Johnston from an episode just recently about interventions, and he was the interventionist, of course, right? So he's come on as a sponsor, and they don't just do interventions. They do family case management, treatment placement. Treatment placement is a free courtesy service, and reaching out is a free and completely confidential. So give them a shout, guys. You can reach them at 615-484-8792 or email at info@rosecrestrecoveryservices.com. Remember, they lead men and women to a life of recovery. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. Right.
And I think like anything,
the fellowship alone,
there's... I think like anything everything has to continue to evolve, right? As humans, we have to continue to evolve. I think as programs, we always have to be evolving. And when AA began, there weren't a lot of pharmacologic solutions to addiction.
Right.
Good point.
There are today. There, not for everything, unfortunately, but there are now things like methadone and Suboxone and Cadian. And so I think, and just like humans, change is hard and change is slow, but I hope that as time passes, I hope 20 years from now, 50 years from now, that AA and NA are still around helping millions of people, but that there is more acceptance. And I think it's just, we're all human.
You got the old guard still, right? You're not that far off from some of the original members still being alive, right? Like, I don't think we're probably just past that point now, but we're not that far away from it. So a lot has changed in that time. And as you're sitting here saying that, Lisa, I think about the faith part of 12-step. Well, back in 1920 or 1910 or whatever, I'm sorry, I don't remember the year, faith was a much bigger part of our lives than it is now. Right. So you can see, hey, that the book is still the book. They've made some revisions, but it really hasn't changed that much. They've added to it. I don't think they've taken anything from it. So you can imagine that it would have been a much bigger deal back then. So, and hope maybe that part evolves with the program as well. Maybe, I don't know.
Also, I piggybacking on what you said about not having the resources, back then, the way that they detox was going into Bill's house and toughing it out.
Shitting it out,
nowadays,
really, right?
I wonder how many people died of seizures or, from detox withdrawals detox and withdrawals. It's very dangerous, but they didn't know about medication. Even medications we don't even argue about, like phenobarbital. I don't know what you guys use for detox up there, but
what do we use, Doctor?
We use all of them.
Lisa?
Yeah,
it depends. We probably, with alcohol, because certain things are not unsafe to detox from, right? They're uncomfortable, like detoxing from meth,
opiates,
detoxing
right?
from cocaine.
Right.
Even opiates, though, it's not dangerous. It's just really, really uncomfortable.
Right? And it's
you
one
feel
of
like
the
you
ones
want to die,
where
but you're not going to die, right?
Yeah. But when it comes to, the things that are dangerous, which is predominantly alcohol and benzos, we use benzos, but we use long-acting benzos, so we figure out sort of what dose they were on. We come up with an equivalent long-acting instead of short-acting, and then it's sort of tapered, over the course of a few days to a week, usually. But yeah, so mostly we use benzos.
Wow, I didn't know that. And benzos being my understanding is that it's alcohol and benzos are the two things that you could potentially die from detoxing from, right?
That's right, yeah.
My understanding of it anyway. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So there's protocols, in the hospital where if someone comes in and they're addicted to alcohol or they're addicted to benzos, then we put this protocol in place, a CWA protocol, and, the nurses will go see them on a regular basis, assessing for symptoms of withdrawal, and then the dosing of the benzos, which, often, for example, diazepam would be one that we would use. It's dosed sort of based on how they score on a CWA protocol.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a bunch of technical stuff in there, but
CWA.
somebody's paying attention is what you're saying, right?
Someone's paying attention, adjusting a dose. Yeah. I mean, I do think nowadays, one of the goals, we don't, as much as possible, we don't want people to suffer unnecessarily, right? So someone comes in, and even if with opiates, the nice thing with opiates is that we do have medications we can use. So again, their withdrawal is not going to kill them, but it doesn't mean that we bring them in and say, well, suck it up, buttercup, and let them, go through a bunch of withdrawal symptoms. Right away, we're in there.
Did I ever tell you the story about the first time I was exposed to fentanyl? Is it around me? Is it recreational? It's ever a recreational drug. Maybe the first time you try it, or second time. But I was sharing a motel room with this person. She had gone to sleep before I left. I had never seen dope sick before. I'd only seen ornery dope sick. I hadn't seen really dope sick yet. I left. I came back. 3 hours later, she was still sleeping. I went into the back room, and the person I was with was like, "Oh, be quiet. I don't want to wake her up. I don't know what it looks like after a few more hours." And I heard Helen Keller coming out of the front room. It was the most awful sound when she woke up. She was screaming in pain. And I'd never, ever seen anything even close to this, right? What the fuck is going on? And we come running out. And she's screaming in pain, and she's sick. She's really, really sick. And I sat there with her for 3 hours until I could find her something, right? And it was like, I'm never trying that drug, right? So it was a blessing for me, right, to have to sit there and experience that with her. But the thing I really took from it was that is a human being suffering, and you don't choose that. Fuck that. Nobody chooses to roll around screaming in pain, shitting yourself because you don't have your drug of choice. Nobody does that, right? You made a bunch of micro decisions that got you to that point, and now you're just a human being suffering, right? So you're right. Why would you let him suffer if you've got the means to stop that, right? So, anyway, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, but right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other difference between Smart Recovery is they don't have 12 steps, but they do have 4 points. And it's kind of like chapters. There's actually a workbook that you can get. It's like $10. And it's legit. It's not, sometimes you get those pamphlets and workbooks and they're real cheesy. This is actually real stuff you can actually use because Smart Recovery is based out of REBT, which is a technique in therapy, and CBT, which is another technique in therapy. A lot of old dead white guys created it back in the day, right? The reason why I like REBT, and it stands for Rational, Emotional, Behavioral Therapy, for anybody listening out there. But one thing whenever I draw on the board is the E always comes before the B. Emotion comes from the behavior. So almost every behavior we do is backed by an emotion. I'm sad, I cry. I'm angry, I punch you in the face, right? So I'm happy, we laugh. I'm happy, we dance. There's always an emotion typically before the behavior. And so they tried to use that same REBT technique with Smart Recovery. So if you have an emotion that's negative, the behavior doesn't have to be used. Behavior can be anything else. And so that's where it backs up with power of choice. So the 4 points, the first one is building and maintaining motivation. Because I don't know about you guys way up there in Canada where it's probably nice and cool. What is the temperature, by the way?
Today?
30 Celsius or something stupid.
It's only 20.
Well,
So,
I don't know.
That's Celsius, so that's
double it.
So you're thinking
32.
Fahrenheit. Right? Yeah, so 72.
So 40, 72. 72 Fahrenheit.
Okay. It should be about 108 by the afternoon here.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I have a fan, like, all anyway, the first one is building and maintaining motivation. And a lot of times down here, if you say, what was your reason of relapse? I was bored. So many people say, I was bored. I had nothing to do. I have no passion. I have nothing going for me. I'm just sober. And it's not rainbows. And so they wanted to put that in there. The second one is coping with urges. And they kind of talk about the difference between urges, triggers, cravings. And then the third one is really that REBT, that managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And four
Erin,
is living a balanced life.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you explain the difference between REBT and CBT? Just because obviously with CBT, like emotions, behaviors, thoughts, that's kind of the basis of
lay
CBT.
People here, nothing is obvious about anything you just said. So let's back that up a bit, please, Lisa.
I got you.
So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's sort of a triad where it looks at the relationship between how you think, how you feel, and how you behave.
Okay.
And so I'm curious how that's different, because describing REBT, where sort of an emotion precipitates a behavior, that's sort of similar to CBT, and I'm wondering how they're different. I've actually never heard of REBT.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah.
Never.
So it's just the lowly Canadians up here, right? No Vivitrol, no REBT, REBTT. Nobody's there with me. Okay.
Yeah. I got you. We can probably make a song. So CBT is kind of at the top. REBT is actually kind of under the umbrella. So they're very similar. So you're in the right, genre. So REBT preaches like an unconditional, like self-acceptance. Like you can always have the choice. Like you can do it. Because especially with addiction, right? How many things in addiction is irrational? We know it's bad for me. I use it anyway, right? I know I'm not supposed to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. Irrational. I know how to quit, but I can't quit. It's very irrational. So REBT tries to help you with that. CBT, a lot of it in therapy, there's a lot of like, what are you laughing at?
He's still dancing over there to REBT. I feel like we needed to give him a moment, get it out.
I mainly do it for the judgy look on Carl's face, right? It makes me happy. It warms my heart every time I get that judgy look. So, yeah. Anyway.
So it's not judgy. I'm just embarrassed for you.
And I think every time Erin has subsequently said REBT, he's kicking back in. Yeah.
Right.
So REBT tries to get you to like learn new ways of behaving with the emotion. Like
I think we need some REBT right now.
We're having some behavioral issues from our host here right now.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. Okay. It's been a long night. Okay, continue. Yeah.
It's been a long night.
Fuck.
Needless to say, they're very similar, and they work on like changing your thinking, changing your like actions, kind of thing. That's a layman's terms, I guess. So another fun example, I like playing this game with people. So if I said, hey, I need money, I'm going to go rob the Circle K. That's a gas station, by the way. Do y'all have those? Oh, no.
And now for a quick PSA brought to you by
Revolution Recovery, helping men recover and become their best selves through support and treatment. They've been there and they understand.
Hi listeners, this is Lena. I'm part of the Ashes to Awesome team and co-hosted on episodes 76 and 67. Do you carry Narcan, also known as naloxone? If not, perhaps you should. The kits are not only compact and easy to use, they are free at all harm reduction centers and a lot of pharmacies. By carrying one of these kits, you could save the life of somebody who loves and that is loved. I get that most of you never plan on being around opioid use, but there's no telling when it could be around you. I can't think of a good reason not to have it, and if you're not sure where to find it for free, send us an email at ashestooawesomepodcast@gmail.com. The legwork for you and find it for free in your area. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
I'm going to go rob a gas station.
They bought out our Max stores, actually. Yeah, we have them all over the place.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go rob a Circle K. Who is going to come do it with me? Anybody?
I'm in. Let's fuck it.
Of course you are.
If anybody is, it's going to be me. But yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, this is the perfect example. So he's in. Lisa, are you in?
No thanks.
Carl, are you in?
I'm a pass.
All right.
You had to think about
Carl
it for a second,
Lisa,
for a quick second.
He did.
Yeah.
I know the people at Circle K here. They'd recognize me.
They passed because they have a bigger value system. So they might value freedom or not going to jail, whereas Chuck's like, no big deal. Done it before. It's not that scary to me.
Well, there is that.
So neither answer is really wrong, but it'll show you like the value system, and that's a big thing with smart recovery. Some people, if I said, "Hey, I need to get a quick $50," some people would say, "Go rob grandma." Some people would say, "Go mow grandma's yard." Right?
Now, is it about your value system, or is it about risk aversion? Because, like, for example, I just know I'm a super risk-averse person, and so it's like, for me, the risk of getting caught, the risk of going to jail, the risk of, I don't know, getting hurt or hurting somebody, those things, it's like I'm not willing to take that risk. Whereas I feel like for some people, they're willing to accept a lot more risk. And so is it values or is it risks?
She started, you're a risk taker. We get it. Right? It's funny that you said that because, I have been my entire life. I'm a risk taker, right?
I think you avoid risk because of your values. You avoid risk because you value your home, you value your job, you value your freedom. Whereas some people might have a high risk because they don't really value those things as much as, someone else. So, I've had tons of clients that are like, jail's nothing. Like, do a quick 90, turn around, and
see, and for me, that wasn't the case at all. For me, I genuinely believed I wasn't going to get caught. Right? This is why I've always thought that jail is a horrible deterrent. Right? Nobody ever committed a crime knowing they were going to get caught. Right? So who cares if it's 10 years or 20 years? If I don't think I'm going to get caught, I don't care about the consequence. Right? So I don't. Yeah, for me, it's different. It's different than that, I guess.
And I think, like, my psychiatry brain also, like, brings ADHD into it, right? Is it a value-based problem or an ADHD problem? Because, like, one of the things I find is when I'm working with people who have histories, like criminal histories, legal histories, my default is not, well, you're bad. You're a bad person, you have shitty values, and so you do all these things. I'm often like, wait a minute, does this person have ADHD? Do they have impulsive ADHD?
Really? Is that the first thing that comes to you, honestly?
Honestly.
Really?
I inherently do not want to believe people are bad, and I inherently believe people are not bad. I believe that the majority of people, even who have done bad things, are not bad people. So I'm always looking for...
Without a doubt, right?
Yeah, and what's the explanation for why a good person is going to do a bad thing?
But how does ADHD play into that? Like, you really have my attention right now.
Oh, totally. Like, especially when you've got...
She has her attention.
You've got two types. Right. Ding, ding.
Do you know how many ADHD kids it takes to change a light bulb?
Right.
One ride bikes, right?
So...
Continue,
I feel like
please,
the
Lisa.
show, like the humor today, it's great. It's a good laugh.
Devolved. The show has devolved. That's what y'all took off. Y'all, look, that happened. For a week, you were both gone the same week. Everything went to shit in your you got to have one of you here, or the show devolves. That's what happens. Okay, so yeah, I accept your apologies. All right. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like totally. For me, and again, it's a lens I look through as a psychiatrist, but when I've got someone who's done a bunch of stuff as a kid, like, two things are in my mind. One is it conduct disorder, right? But the other is ADHD, and it's particularly the hyperactive, impulsive type of ADHD, because those are kids who they'll go do bad things and then afterwards have a ton of remorse. Like they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that I stole that I hurt that person. And that kind of helps you differentiate between that versus conduct, where a conduct kid's like, I don't care, you know. But if there's a ton of remorse after you've done something bad, you know, it's a red flag for that particular type of ADHD. And so again, I can see how you can have really strong values, but if you have untreated hyperactive impulsive ADHD, there's a chance you're going to go do bad things and then have a ton of remorse after the fact. You know?
This wasn't an ADHD episode, but it's quickly turning into that. I've got questions now. So, for me, it wouldn't be that I felt bad that I had done something unless somebody got hurt, or unless there was an unforeseen consequence of, you know, hurting other people or whatever. But I would, as a kid, I never felt bad for stealing, ever. Right? And maybe I should have, you know, are you sorry because you got caught, or are you sorry because you're sorry? Well, let's be honest, Mom, it's because I got caught. Right? I don't think I was a bad person. I don't think I am a bad person. I think I'm, you know, but what is the difference there now? Like that, you know, or am I just am I being that guy that's like, well, it wasn't like that for me, so it's, you know, that's not the thing. But, or is there a different type of ADHD, or what's
the justification piece? So, you know, were you the kid that stole a bag of chips from the grocery store because you were hungry? And then you said, well, I'm hungry, and so I deserve these bag of chips. Or
well, I was a fat kid,
did you
so
still...
I was always hungry, so there was that.
I think some of it is values. I think some of that comes into the value piece of, you know, like I start to think about values, entitlement, you know, like, well, I deserve that. And that store doesn't need the money as much as I needed the chips. And so I'm going to steal the chips, right? And so I
think I was completely disassociated from all of that. It was, well, I want the chips, I take the chips. There was no math involved. There was no justifying. There was no making like none of that. It was just like, I'll just steal the shit because I wanted the shit. Right?
Yeah.
And
but that is a form of entitlement, though. Right?
Okay,
I wanted it, therefore I should get it. I'm entitled to it.
Yeah. Okay,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, all this stuff overlaps, right? As you can't weed it all apart, but I think it comes down to people's personality styles, people's sense of entitlement, people's values. But I think for me, again, it's just that lens of, is there also a piece of ADHD? Right? Because there's certain things that we can treat. And particularly, like, I don't know, Erin, you've probably heard this too, but like I don't work with kids, but we have to in residency do 6 months of child and adolescent psychiatry. And it was so common that it's like we would see ADHD and the parents would be like, well, I don't want you to put my kid on a stimulant because you're going to turn them into a drug addict. And it's like, well, actually the opposite is what the evidence shows us, is that treating your child's ADHD will protect them against becoming addicted to substances later in life, right? Which we've talked about before, but...
Chuck, you were a stimulant.
I think that'd be a pretty great example of that, right? You know.
I didn't know that. I was right. I guessed right.
Oh, there's no doubt. I didn't know. I didn't have a clue, Erin, until maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I was actually with Carl's wife in the car. She says, well, that's why you did coke and meth, right? Because it leveled you out. It's like, holy fuck. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what this whole thing was, right?
Absolutely.
That's why I have 5 Chrome sign-ins and 10 open tabs in each one. And that's why I spend half my day looking for files in my computer. That's why, because I'm not doing coke and meth anymore. Right? Mm-hmm. They're not, keeping me zoned in. I'm not doing the stimulants, right? So, geez, yeah, I'll have to get to a doctor and get a prescription or something one of these days. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to move on to Vivitrol from here. Vivitrol, did I say it right that time? Vivitrol? Okay. Sorry if I'm being a little loopy. Like I was up all night fighting with this fucking computer. So, once again, and I've got interviews, like at least 1 or 2 every day until Wednesday, and tech issues. Fuck. Right? So, I'm going to sleep tonight at a normal hour. So, but I'm going to stay up all day. So I'm going to be loopy for the rest of the day.
Chuck, can I ask one thing? We want to talk about Vivitrol, which is awesome. But Erin, I'm curious if I could ask one other question about SMART.
Yeah.
Do you feel, because you said you've done this, like you've worked as an addiction counselor for 13 years. When did you start learning about SMART recovery?
think you mentioned that in the beginning, didn't you?
So it's been around since the 90s. And then...
Oh, that's what you said, yeah.
I started counseling about 2011, probably about 3 or 4 years into counseling.
Okay. So you've got like tons of addiction counseling. And then you've also got like a significant amount of time doing SMART recovery counseling. Do you feel like there's a certain client or patient where you're like SMART would be really good for you, or do you feel like you have a preference for SMART recovery over other modalities of addiction therapy?
So in my experience, I've seen a lot of younger people like SMART recovery, because some of my older people are I don't want to say, my younger people are very, very more why people. Well, why can't I do this? Or why do I have to do step work? Or why do I have to have a higher power? Or why can't I just do it? They're very, not defiant, but they like the information. So when I draw pictures of the brain and show you why it's working or whatever, I see a younger and sometimes my higher functioning clients really light up because it just makes sense and they like what they can understand. Whereas some of my older people, or maybe someone who has only done a different program, is like, oh, just don't drink and use and you won't relapse. That's it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're right. But there's a lot more to that. And we can't
Chuck's
forget
favorite word, just.
Just. Yeah, just. Yeah. Don't get me started.
Do it, man.
Right? Yeah. Don't get me down that shit today, man.
And of course, so also anybody that's on medication-assisted treatment is going to be great for SMART recovery. Anyone who's not wanting to have any type of spirituality with their recovery. Now, I have some people that say, I'm spiritual and I'm religious, but that's over here, and I want my recovery to be over here. Some people don't want to merge it. Some people think you have to merge it. Doesn't matter. Do what you want. But so those people would be really great for SMART recovery because we don't bring in any type of spirituality or religion.
On August 17th and 18th, the Mission Community Services Society is going to be holding a fundraiser called the 24-Hour Homeless Fundraiser. 10 participants will go unhoused for an immersive experience being homeless as a way to raise awareness and funds for Mission's new community medical mobile unit, the MMU. I talked to Nate at MCSS about this fundraiser, and here's what he had to say.
So we send them out and say, well, go find a job. Well, without ID, how are you going to get hired? You have a resume, but you have no way to get your resume right now, so I don't know what you're going to do, but you still got to go look for work. You've got to find an income. Talk to income assistants. Ask them how you get income assistance when you don't have ID.
Yeah.
Right? And so people start to recognize, like, it's not as simple as get a job.
It's really not. I have some resources, I have some family that was helping me out, and the frustration almost broke me when I came in from active addiction.
So that's what the fundraiser is for, is to keep that medical mobile unit on the road. But it's also for people to have a real in-depth look at homelessness and just see how tough that struggle is when you're trying to get out of it.
It never comes up.
And I feel like younger people, and I'm like totally stereotyping right now, but I feel like older generations, it's like they were just taught it is what it is because I said it is what it is. Like, don't ask questions, right?
Without
and
a
it's
doubt.
like,
Yeah.
I feel like people were raised like that, like, because I said so, that's why. And I think younger generations expect more. They're like, but why? Like, explain to me why I can't do that, or explain to me why that's bad. And so I'm not surprised, I don't think, to hear that you find the younger generation want to understand the why of things more.
I think part of that would be, again, go back to the faith part as well, generationally, right? It's it's a much bigger thing.
Yeah.
To our parents than it is to us, and to to their parents, to them, and so on and so forth, right? So, I think that's probably a factor in there as well. My question, though, and maybe this is me just being vain or selfish or something, what is younger or older now? What generation is considered? In your office, for instance, Erin. You just said some of the younger generation. Where's that cutoff?
You're not old, Chuck.
Oh, I'm old. Don't get me wrong.
That's what we all want to hear.
Young. I look young. What I did is I pickled myself with years and years of drug use, so I just started to age again now. Right? Yeah. No,
I personally feel Gen X is probably the first generation that started saying why.
Gen X is when's that birth?
Like 75
That's
to
like
84.
90s.
Okay, so we're Gen X.
Oh, Gen X. Sorry, I'm thinking Gen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like,
I didn't know.
I know for me, I'm a big why guy, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, hey, I need you to do this, and I need to know why it needs to be done, not just that it needs to be done.
I worked with Carl for years. Let me tell you.
I also still have a bit of, like, from my parents who were boomers. I kind of have that bit of a work ethic where it's just like, this has to be done, so we just do it, and we worry about the why later. Whereas maybe more the millennials are just like, no, I need a why. But I think Gen X was the first generation that started saying, like, well, I need a little why to this, right? Like, I'm not just going to go out and do this just because you said. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if maybe you see it different in your clinic or your office.
So we're in between the young and old. Is that what you just said? Yeah.
Gen X is a transitional generation.
Sorry, Erin, go ahead.
It's like the the Gen Z. These are like people born like after like 95, 97, that kind of thing. They're very much like, if I'm off at 5, I'll leave at 5. Whereas millennial and older is like, if your boss asks you to stay 30 minutes past 5, you're like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. You're my boss. Whereas Gen Z's like, no, mental health, self-care, right?
Yeah.
And it's weird because they're both kind of right. I guess that's why I'm a millennial, because I kind of see both ways. I'm like, yeah, I do want to like shut my computer at 5 and be like, I'm off. But I also am that person that, wants to be great in the workplace, and I want to make my boss happy.
Yeah. Make the rest of them Zers look like slackers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been managed
so
most
earlier
of my life,
I said
I'm total opposite.
I was talking about, medication-assisted treatment approved for, smart recovery meetings, and Vivitrol is kind of the one I wanted to explain to some people today that's listening. Yeah. So, I like when you said earlier, Chuck, like, hey, layman's terms, like, we don't know all the science stuff, and I'm very
essentially my job on this show is to dumb it down. That's what I do, right? Or ask to get it dumbed down.
I got you.
So, yeah.
Got you. Because when I'm describing it, I'm usually talking to somebody who's, wanting the medication. They don't know how, the cortex and limbic system and all that stuff. They don't know all that. So I'm very used to explaining how Vivitrol works really, really well. So
well, that's setting
the really
bar
cool
pretty high. Let's have it.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna do it.
Now you've set the bar. You shouldn't have done that. You could have easily impressed us. Now, if you don't get there, it's going to be a letdown, right? So
I'm gonna get there. So in everybody's brain, addict or not, we have receptors, and those guys make things work. So we have receptors. Literally, you want to name it, there's a receptor for it. There's a receptor for eating your favorite food. There's a receptor for drugs. There's a receptor for alcohol. There's a receptor for going fast on the interstate, right? All this stuff, everything we do,
so
there's some kind of receptor.
Separate receptors, or are those pleasure receptors?
I don't know that answer. But the only one I want you to worry about today is the mu receptor.
Okay.
I always think of receptors as like this. I think of receptors as, this.
I do this.
And then, right? And then items come in and they bind into the receptor, right? And when something sits inside the receptor, it activates something, whether it's a sense of pleasure, a sadness, a feeling, a physical sensation, right? You need these two things to come together, and then there's an effect, right?
It's kind of like plugging a plug into an outlet and the lamp turning on.
Okay. Enough with the sexual innuendos. Okay, continue. Yeah.
With my Narcan.
I'm sorry. I
knew you were going there.
I'm like so naive. Like my brain didn't go there at all.
Oh my God.
I love her. Okay.
Do you work with people in recovery? Like, okay. Yeah.
Anyway. She's our muggle, eh? She is our muggle. Lisa is our muggle.
I am.
Yeah, we love her for it too. Yeah.
So I'm gonna use Lisa's because I do it this way. They're kind of like buckets, okay? And we got a bunch of them. We all do. We all have the mu receptor, and that guy is responsible for two things: alcohol and opiates. Okay? And we all have them. But people who use alcohol and opiates have a bunch of them. There's a lot more. And that's where cravings come from. So people think, oh, it's a choice. It's a choice. If I'm a real big fat guy with a real big stomach, I'm going to need more food, right? It's very similar to that. If I have more receptors, if I have more mu receptors, they're empty. And the only thing you can fill me with, alcohol and opiates.
Is this literal or figurative? I'm sorry to interrupt you one again.
This is pretty literal. You have more.
Like, it's science, like there's actually more receptors in a brain of somebody who's an addict, and
absolutely.
I've never heard this before. So
yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, are you guys coffee drinkers?
Was at one point anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time you had coffee, your brain either goes, yes, I love this, or no, I don't like this. And so when your brain goes, yes, I like it, you're going to drink it more. That's tolerance. That's likes.
It's going to make more room. So tolerance would be the extra receptors that you're speaking of? Okay.
So Erin, can I interrupt and ask one question, though? Because if you, for example, though, are addicted to heroin, over time, you're actually going to downgrade your mu receptors, right? Because you're flooding them. And so your brain will actually downgrade the number because it's going, like, you have a certain number of receptors at baseline. But if you're addicted to heroin, where you're flooding your receptors all the time, what your brain does is it tries to compensate. And what it does is it downgrades, reduces the number of mu receptors to try to compensate for the fact that you're flooding your brain's mu receptors. And this is part of why when you're in early recovery, this is why you struggle with, for example, things like depression, is because your receptors have downregulated.
Plummeted. Right? Plummeted, yes. And that's why a lot of people, like we say, chasing the dragon or chasing the high, is because you've kind of already, the fireworks have kind of already happened, and you're trying to make them go again, and it doesn't really, it's not the same. It's never the same. Mm-hmm. So we've got those buckets, right? And let's say they're empty. When we're about to use an opiate or alcohol, obviously it comes into your body, and we all think it happens like in your stomach or whatever, but it's really happening up here. So what happens, kind of like Lisa was saying, it comes in, lands, parks, and then releases whatever it's going to release, and that's all happy and good, and we're having a great time. Now, if we have the receptor and we have Vivitrol in our system, Vivitrol just puts a lid. It doesn't fill it, puts a lid. So it's still an empty receptor, but I don't have enough arms. But if something was trying to come into this receptor, it can't. Right? So it's like...
That was awesome.
It's like...
resourceful. You're like resourceful as an addict, right there.
I told you I'm good. And so we put a lid. Look at Carl. Carl's like...
Carl's laughing on the inside. Chuck is laughing on the outside.
Normally, I'm drawing this to show you how this works.
More emotion than we've seen collectively from Carl since we started the show. You just saw it all right there, right?
Yes.
That's the extent of it.
Okay, here I am. Here I am as an opiate.
Can Chuck.
You are.
But something Lisa was saying earlier that I always go back to. Naltrexone is the pill form. Vivitrol is the shot form. Why y'all don't have it in Canada, I don't know, and I'm going to find out. Because Vivitrol, it has been proven to be more successful, because if you're supposed to take a pill every day to not relapse and you want to get loaded on Friday night, what do you think you're going to do on Wednesday?
Yeah, you're going to stop taking that pill for sure.
Stop taking the pill. Easy.
Yeah.
But the injection, addiction used to be an impulse control disorder, right? People would just make quick decisions, and even though they're wrong. And so the Vivitrol injection, you don't even have to worry about it. You get it, and for 30 days, you're kind of safe. I don't really like using that word, and some people say, "But Erin, I don't want to swap an addiction for another addiction." So naltrexone and Vivitrol are antagonists, which means they are not agonists. An agonist is something that is probably going to be an opiate or a partial opiate. Naltrexone Vivitrol has 0 opiate in it. None. You can't shoot it, snort it, sell it. It's not addictive.
I'll bet you I could sell it.
I think of it too as like, something that is an agonist, like heroin is an agonist, is going to activate the receptor, whereas naltrexone is going to block it, right? So agonize it versus antagonize it, or activate it versus block it.
Oh, okay.
And so the naltrexone is going to block it.
That's easier for me to wrap my head
around. And the other important thing is that anything that binds into the mu receptor, there's different substances have different affinities for the receptor. So things will come in and kick the other thing off the receptor. Naltrexone has one of the highest affinities for the mu receptor. So if you've got heroin in your body and you've got naltrexone in your body at the same time, naltrexone will win.
Wins. Okay.
And you will not be a happy person, mind you.
Yeah.
Because it's going to
put Suboxone does the same thing, does it not? Or do I have that wrong?
I'll tell you the difference between that. So let's envision that you have your mu receptor, but you still have a little bit of like some kind of opiate in your receptor. So naltrexone's coming in, and it's going to put a lid on it, but it says, you're not supposed to be here, get out. And it throws it out.
You're not supposed to be here.
And then withdrawal hits.
And you are not happy. It's like hardcore withdrawals.
Yeah.
Are you following me, though? Like, are you getting it?
No, absolutely I am.
See? I told you.
I am. So... I want to draw a little.
For people that are just listening, make sure that you watch this episode.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
It makes much more sense to you. Thank you for catching that, Carl. I'm guilty of forgetting about that. Yeah.
And so people say, well, what's the problem? Like, why don't people want Vivitrol? I used to work in the prison system. Work, not live, work. And they didn't really like
to live in the prison system. What?
So they didn't want Vivitrol because they said, Erin, it will force people to overdose, which is a very big myth, and that's something I wanted to explain to people. So what they think is, if I have an empty receptor and I have Vivitrol blocking my receptor and I use heroin or opiates, you're going to have to use a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. Because you're going to have to basically use so much that you're going to have to fill your receptor up and take the lid off at the same time. That hardly ever happens, because to do that, you're going to have to take so much, and it's going to flood your receptor, and it's going to put you in an overdose. So there really is no using or getting high while on Vivitrol. So people say, yeah, that's my point. People are going to die on Vivitrol. I'm like, they're not dying from Vivitrol, they're dying from the heroin use. So even if let's envision that there is no Vivitrol lid and you use all that heroin, it's going to fill it up, it's going to overflow, and it will overdose. It's no different. If you take the same amount of drugs with or without heroin, that's more than you're supposed to, I guess. Your tolerance.
But isn't the argument that you take more because you're not getting high, so you're putting that much more in your system?
Correct.
Isn't that the argument?
Yeah. But people think, oh, I'm taking more heroin because you put me on Vivitrol. Yeah. And that's why education is so important when you're giving Vivitrol to your clients.
I'm still seeing it that way. I'm missing something, Erin, because to me that is. I'm not understanding it. Are you seeing this wrong, or? I
think of it
something
the way
that was fundamental to this, right?
Yeah, because I think that is true, though, isn't it, Erin? Like, the whole thing is that if you use the same amount of heroin you did pre-Vivitrol, you're not going to get the experience because the Vivitrol is blocking the receptor. So people will try to flood the Vivitrol out by using an increased amount of heroin. But ultimately, it's the fact that you're using increased heroin that's going to lead to a problem.
Of course, but...
There is no middle
for the increased heroin.
So I'll use alcohol for an example, because I feel like it could be really easy for all listeners. So you drink one beer, probably not going to get really much. So we drink 6 beers, but the person that goes from 1 beer to 1/5 of hard alcohol is a huge difference. But people go 1 and 1, right? So you have to it's all about the education. You have to explain to clients there is no blowing out the lid and being high. That will not happen. Some people just think, oh, if you take more, you'll get high. You take more of your tolerance, you'll get it. You got to just learn. No, it does not work that way.
Okay. What's the fifth?
It's
It's
a 2.6.
Thank you. Okay. Canadian American, right? I just wanted to kind of wrap my head around the volume set. So.
You asked me what a fifth was. Sorry, 750.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. There you go.
Yeah, 750 mils, right?
Yeah,
right?
2.6.
Yeah,
26
ounces. Yeah. Canadians are great at conversion.
I know. I'm like, y'all are killing it.
Well, our neighbors refuse to use the metric system, so we have to.
Like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Right. Come on, America, do better.
I will give you some really fun numbers. 90% of people who use Vivitrol. No, when they did, hold on, let me get this right, because it's not 90%. When they did the study, the people who took Vivitrol versus the people who did the placebo had 90% opiate-free weeks.
Okay.
Versus the people that took the placebo, so they thought they were taking Vivitrol, they had 35% opiate-free weeks.
Significant difference for
so
sure.
The placebo still helped some people, but it almost tripled when they were taking the real medication. So it's not just people say, it's just a mental thing. No, it's not.
Have they compared Vivitrol to Suboxone, Methadone, Cadian to see, difference in outcomes?
You keep saying Cadian, and I don't know what that is.
It's long-acting morphine. And so usually what I find is that for folks who have opiate use disorder, right, usually, at least nowadays, I find that the first thing they'll go to is Suboxone or Sublocade. For some people, and I'm hearing more and more that this is not real life, but I think what patients tend to perceive is that, well, depending on how severe their opiate use disorder is, they don't feel like Suboxone is sufficient, and a next step would be to go to methadone. Then you've got people who even methadone does not do enough to block cravings. Those very severe cases, like I think in the last 5 years, I know two patients that I've had who were put on Cadian, which is long-acting morphine. So it's not
sold on the street quite a bit too. Cadians are.
Yeah, probably. Although with it being long-acting, I don't know. It's spelled with a K, Kadian.
Yeah, they're definitely sold quite a bit on the street.
Yeah. So
because it's long-acting, I would be surprised if it would give you much of a rush, but
True.
Yeah, I think it's that.
Well, the only comparison I can tell you is, methadone is going to be a lot safer for your pregnant people in recovery.
Really?
And so Suboxone, Subutex, and Vivitrol isn't approved for pregnancy in the United States. I don't know if it's different anywhere else. So methadone is the safest way, although it's still not great.
But methadone, it could be deadly quite easily, can it not be?
Absolutely.
With me with zero tolerance ever to any sort of opiates my entire life,
correct,
it doesn't take a lot of methadone to kill me, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So it definitely has got its cons, of course.
Yeah.
Because methadone, Suboxone, and Subutex are those agonists. And when you say agonist in recovery, that means it has some form of opiate in there. So back to our receptor, when you put Suboxone, it's not going to fill up your whole receptor like if you did heroin, but it puts a little bit of opiate in there and an opiate blocker. So I call Suboxone like a teeter-totter drug. Like, it's kind of cool, kind of not. It just kind of depends, because it's half opiate or half fake opiate and then half opiate blocker. So it does, but I'm a big fan of Sublocade, which is what Lisa was talking about, the injection or the implant, because you can't, you're always taking the right dose. You're never selling it. You're never getting it off the street. You're never using it dangerously.
We don't do the implant here, though, do we, Lisa?
I don't think so.
Do you in the United States? Do you do the implant?
Yes, absolutely.
I know they do it in South Africa, right? That's what we were talking about there, right? Was that Sublocade implant? So
we do Sublocade, but Sublocade's an injection, right? I don't think it's an implant. I think it's an injection. Isn't it an IM injection?
Ours is an abdominal implant. It goes in your upper.
Really? Eh?
It's it's kind of
because we do have Sublocade, like it's a once a month. Let me just see if it's an injection or an implant.
Yeah, and they move it so
once a month injection. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. No.
So like if you look at somebody and put a cross on their belly, they've got 4 quadrants, and so each time you get a Sublocade implant, they move it.
Okay.
Okay. And then there's different doses. Don't quote me, but I want to say it's like 300 and 100 and things like that. But it's
so we do have it. We do have it. It's called Propufine, and it's an implant that lasts 6 months, but apparently it's quite hard to access in Canada. So we use Sublocade with it, which is a monthly injection.
Okay.
See, and we call Sublocade the implant. That's cool.
Oh. Hmm.
Interesting.
And I got to look up this Cadian thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well, and I was going to talk to y'all about, how people get it, because it's very easy to get here. A lot of insurance companies cover it, and, Medicaid definitely covers it. A lot of people don't have out-of-pocket expenses when they use Vivitrol's website, because there's a savings plan on there. I think it's 90 to 92% of people don't even have an out-of-pocket expense, but out-of-pocket is about $1,200 here, which is pretty expensive. Okay. But even if we wanted to really
compared
compare
to the cost of
right, like heroin is kind of pricey, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not that. It's not that. It's the cost of the addiction on society and the cost of on the family and on your life. It's not the cost of the drug. Heroin, now fentanyl, is amazingly cheap.
Oh yeah.
It is crazy cheap right now, right? When I got busted in 2021, it was $4,000 an ounce. It's roughly 15% of the cost as it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. 15%. Yeah.
And it's crazy to me how y'all, I don't know why you don't have Vivitrol approved there. It's very interesting.
Generally, we like to test it on Americans before we bring it up here.
Well, good news for you, Carl. Is we have some good stats for you.
One of the other things, Erin, that I've heard about Vivitrol in terms of opiate use disorder is that because it is purely an antagonist, that it doesn't satisfy cravings. So while it'll block if someone were to go use when they're on Vivitrol, they're not going to get high and they're going to be protected against overdose, but that there's a higher likelihood that they're going to stop the Vivitrol and go relapse because they continue to crave when they're on Vivitrol, because as you said, there's no agonist component to it.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up cravings, because Vivitrol, it decreases your cravings by 56%.
Interesting.
And if you know anything about stats, that's a really large number. And so, I think it's really great that, of course, it blocks it, but it's going to turn down the cravings. And if we don't crave it or want to use it, we're probably not. Typically, we don't do stuff we're not wanting to do if it's not a physical, withdrawal.
Yeah.
But by the time you're
without
on Vivitrol,
without it having an agonist component, though, how does it turn down, pharmacologically, how does it turn down the craving?
I think, if I remember correctly, when I was learning about the receptors and how it closes them off, it doesn't close off all of them. So some people say, oh, well, if it closes off all my receptors, am I going to be a zombie? So I think it kind of closes off most of them, but not all of them. So everybody in the world has mu receptors. 5-year-olds have mu receptors, right? And so, but they're not, if we put a bottle of vodka in front of them, they're not going to light up. They're just whatever. But if you have somebody that's got a ton of those mu receptors, they're going to be like, ooh, right? And so I think if some of them are kind of turned off, if we pulled electricity from the wall, the plug is still there. But if I try to plug a lamp in, it's not going to light up.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good question, but I think it's because we close off a good bit of the receptors. And so it's kind of like once the big fat guy gets really skinny, right? He doesn't need as much food, so he's not eating as much. He's not craving it as much.
Okay. We're at an hour. Look at that, eh? Time has gone by. Not that we're stuck to an hour, not at all, Erin. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, we're more than happy to do so, right? It's just around now is when we start looking at it and going, well, have we recorded enough to call it an episode yet? So
yeah.
But yeah, I think we covered the Vivitrol. We covered smart recovery. I think it's fair to say I'm going to be inviting you back on the show You're a great guest. Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah, you're knowledgeable and you put up with my shit, so that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, and maybe next time we'll have one of those days where I've slept and I'm not such a loopy, you know.
I'd love to. I would love to. I had a great time. Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which brings us to my favorite part of the show. That's the Daily Gratitudes.
Today's Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by Yacha Treatment Centers in Phuket, Thailand. They are a clinic run by clinicians, not a business run by businessmen. And they know that where addiction is the smoke, trauma is the fire. Learn more at yachacenters.com. That's YATRACENTRE.com. And now here's your Daily Gratitudes.
All right, Erin. So you got some Daily Gratitudes for us?
I do. I think after, talking with you guys and meeting you, I think I'm grateful for good open discussion about recovery. It's not a cookie cutter type of thing, and I love hearing from all different parts of the world and different interventions we can use, such as smart recovery or medication, faith-based, treatment-based, medications, doctors, all that stuff. I'm really grateful for the opportunity of knowledge.
Yeah. Good stuff. Carl, what do you got for us? Got a gratitude or two?
I am always ever so grateful for my wife and family. They keep me in line. And for the lack of smoke in the air today, I'm very grateful for that. I might actually be able to go outside and putter a bit. And always, I am grateful for you, Chuck, for this show, and I'm grateful to Erin for being on, and Lisa for putting up with us. Yeah, that's about it for today.
Lisa, what you got for us?
Always going to start with the same one. My brother is 4.5 months sober, and I'm grateful for that. I wanted
to say? I wanted to tell you. Your pictures in White Rock.
Yeah.
I love, White Rock's that's my place, right? I got some great stories out of there, right? But on that pier, in that restaurant, Dewey's or Louise or whatever.
Ooley's. My favorite.
Ooley's, yeah, right?
Ooley's.
All the places, every picture that you took, I was like, oh, I was right there. So, yeah, great. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. Yeah,
no, love it there. So I got to go and spend a week. I stayed with my sister-in-law. My brother is there part of the time, and then he's at a recovery program in Surrey, BC. Yep. But, got to see him quite often and spend time with him. And I had my daughter with me, and so she got to spend time with her Uncle David, who she adores. And so I'm grateful for his recovery and his sobriety and his fight. And I know, it's not a walk in the park by any stretch. My brother's struggled for over 20 years, and he's doing really well at the moment. And yeah, he's fighting the fight, and him doing that makes my life better. So I am very grateful for him and what he's doing.
That's awesome. And myself, the conversations, and for y'all for putting up with my shit today, because I'm a little bit loopy, right? Yeah, I'll be saying that for the rest of the day. Until I sleep, I'll be saying y'all, and I'll get my Canada back on after that. Right? After last weekend, pulling that episode, I think it went rather well. The Ramble did, on my own. I kind of put it together, but I tell you, I was pretty grateful for you guys. Right? I was like, this is a lot easier when I've got my people here, and right? It's just scheduling and all that stuff. It just didn't work out. So I'm really grateful that you guys are back, and of course to you, Erin, for coming on and donating your time. I think you said you were going to give us an hour, and we went over that by an hour. So, right? Yeah. And for the final gratitude, it goes out to the listeners. Always to you guys, the listeners. Keep doing what you're doing, please. If you're on Spotify, drop a comment. If you're on Apple, leave a rating, leave a review. If you are on any other social media, if you see the logo, please drop a comment, check it out, to like, a share, do all the things, please. Every time you do any one of these things, you are getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to make a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this. If you are in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start that lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call in a detox, go to a meeting, do whatever the hell it is you need to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you are the loved one of somebody who's suffering in addiction right now, you've just taken the time to listen to this ramble, if you could just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they are loved. Use the words.
You are loved.
that little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings him back.
My body's getting cold, my life is running low. Feel me falling, my life is running out. I pray I make it now, but if I don't, it will be okay. I'll find you another day, and I'm not scared to go. It will be okay. I'll find you another way.